Good afternoon from rainy London. We're here today to talk about sunny Spain. My name is Andy Bridge and I work for a business called Apits Limited. Apits stands for A Place in the Sun, and we publish A Place in the Sun magazine. We organise the website and run the website aplaceinthesun.com, and we also put on the international property exhibitions A Place in the Sun Live. Now, ordinarily, we would be preparing for our large exhibition at London Olympia in a couple of weekends' time, but sadly these are not ordinary times, so that event is not now going ahead. What we decided to do was to take the seminar content from that event and present it online via this format of webinars. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for giving up your time. We do appreciate it. We prepared for these webinars by going out and having a look at other webinars out there on the internet, and decided that there's quite a lot of waffle out there. So we are going to attempt to be waffle free, direct, and involve you guys and answer questions that you might have. So the subject today is buying in Spain and how to ensure a smooth transaction when it comes to the legal side of buying a property in Spain. We welcome questions. There is an icon on your screen. If you just click that, you'll submit questions to us. We'll try to get through them all. And we're also going to be putting up a couple of polls as we run through today's presentation. So let's kick off with one of those right now. I'm going to ask, and a question will come up on your screen. How many of you have actively researched or indeed found an overseas property lawyer to help you with your property purchase in Spain? Our quick poll's not quite living up to its name of a quick poll, and we found that there's only 14%, so 14% have been researching or found a property lawyer, and the rest have not yet done so. So this is a good opportunity to quiz a couple of lawyers. We have two bilingual specialist property lawyers with us. They're speaking for free. You don't often get that with lawyers. And we also have a respected overseas property journalist. So let's jump straight in, and I will ask the guys to introduce themselves. Jose. Let's move on. Let's try Alex. Alex Radford, are you there? Jose, please go ahead. All right, it looks like the internet connection down to Costa Blanca is not quite as strong as we'd like it to be at the moment. Let's try Alex in the Costa del Sol. Alex Radford, how are you? We can't hear you as yet, Alex. Do you have your audio switched on?
Yeah, it's just been reactivated. I'm very well, Andy. How are you doing?
I'm very well indeed. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, Alex.
Well, Andy, my name's Alex Radford. I'm an English solicitor and a Spanish abogado. My parents moved out to Spain in 1981, and then I moved back to UK in 92 to study law, to become a solicitor. I started practicing in 99 and moved back to Spain in 2003. When we moved back to Spain in 2003, my wife and I purchased a plot of land, built a house, and we lived there happily up until moving from Torrox, which is on the kind of eastern side of the Costa del Sol, to Marbella. We've been in Marbella now for 3 years. And basically, I act for clients buying property in Spain, selling, inheriting, and generally doing business in Spain.
Thank you, Alex. Jose Maria, can we hear you any better now?
Yes, I think I can hear you now much better, yes. Hi, hello everyone. Good afternoon from sunny Spain.
And what's your business, Jose Maria? What do you do?
Well, I'm a registered Spanish lawyer here in Spain. I work for a company or law firm called Sun Lawyers, established since 1985. We have 7 offices all across the Costa Blanca, and obviously we deal with mostly British clients that were looking to buy a property in Spain. That's basically
okay. Thank you, thank you. And the third panelist today is journalist and former editor of A Place in the Sun magazine, Richard Way. Richard, how are you?
I'm well, thank you, Andy. Dodging the rain, unfortunately, because I, unlike the other two, don't live in Spain. But I do have a property there, which also is very relevant to our panel today. And my family has owned property in Spain for over 30 years, across two or three generations. So it's been a part of my life since I was a kid. And now my children are very much enjoying regular trips out to Spain, and it's become a big part of their life. As you say, I've been writing about overseas property for nearly 2 decades now, and part of my career doing that was a stint editing A Place in the Sun magazine. Otherwise, I write for a variety of websites and magazines, newspapers that has been about overseas property.
Excellent, thank you. Well, we're going to kick off with yourself, Richard. We had a question in from Steve Bergering, who said, before I start viewing properties, what do I need and how do I go about getting it? So let's make some basic assumptions here. Let's assume you know you can afford it, you've established a budget, you know more or less what you want to buy, you're making some inquiries on property portals such as aplaceinthesun.com. That puts you in touch with estate agents on the ground, and now's the time to be thinking about the next steps and potentially a lawyer. Why would you need to go out and find yourself a lawyer, Richard?
The first thing is, wherever you buy property in the world, in the UK, you would use a lawyer. It's a high value transaction. You're using a lot of money, you know, life savings or inheritance, and you would use a lawyer to protect your interests. In Spain or in any other foreign country, even more so, you want to do that. You're dealing with a system that's in a different language, has different property law. You don't know the locality, you won't know the area as well as the lawyers or the local agents. So you're going in blind, and not going in with legal protection, independent legal protection is really foolhardy. A lot of the problems that we've read about in the past to do with Spain and disaster purchases, you will find that many of those people either didn't use a lawyer, or they were using a lawyer that was tied up with a developer or wasn't truly independent. Use an independent lawyer. It's a small, relatively small fees that you'll pay to use them. The peace of mind that brings, and the time you're going to have enjoying your property over the years, it really doesn't register, just for the peace of mind. The other thing to remember is when you're buying in Spain, you're not just buying a property, but you have to create a new fiscal ID. You need to get a tax number. You'll need to make tax returns. So it isn't purely buying a property, and these are other things that your lawyer will help you with to manage your fiscal affairs once you become a lawyer. And then you need to think about the way you structure your purchase, because for some people it might work to put it in a spouse's name or a child's name. And again, a Spanish lawyer will be able to advise on the best way to doing that to suit your own personal situation. And that leads into, you're going to need to make a will as well. And so using an independent lawyer who's involved from the outset, and I mean early as well, you want to get them involved before you really search for property, so that when you do find something you want and you make an offer, they can check every contract, every bit of paper you might be asked to sign along the way. You can contact them and you know that it's checked, and you're not making a mistake by signing something without their approval.
Okay, thank you, Richard. So, Alex, I'm an excited property buyer. I've been out and met with estate agents and looked at a bunch of properties, and I've fallen in love with one. I come along, I meet you, I come along, and what is the first step in the buying process once I contact you and I say, look, this is the property what I want to buy. I'm based in the UK. How can you help?
Usually, Andy, we would have a conversation about the price. So I'd always advise buyers to kind of speak to the agent and find out why the sellers are selling, how long the property's been on the market for, and then make an offer accordingly. The offers are made via the agent, so then you would agree the price, include a reservation contract would be prepared, and in that reservation contract we'd include conditions such as if the clients or the buyers are going to insist on a survey, we put in there the completion date. Typically, property purchases in Spain take shorter period of time than property purchases in the UK. So we could complete in anywhere up to 12 weeks, earlier, of course, by agreement. And then basically we would check the reservation agreement. We'd make sure that that's fairly balanced in favour of the buyer. And then typically a buyer would pay between 3,000 and 6,000 euros for that property to be taken off the market. I always prefer to see that reservation contract before it's signed and for those monies to come through our account. And then once the reservation contract signed, Andy, or even before, we'd arrange for the power of attorney to be signed. And that power of attorney is a document that authorises us to act for people in Spain, so we can actually complete with them when we get closer to completion.
Okay, thank you. So that's the very first step, and the client's made a deposit, transferred some money. Then, Jose Maria, we're getting into the conveyancing process. What's the next steps as far as you're concerned?
Well, I would obviously, as Alex mentioned, I would suggest that the clients, while they're here in Spain, while they've obviously viewed the property a few times, they do a power of attorney on our behalf, basically because then we can do the whole job for them without being present. We can apply for what we call their NI numbers. This is the fiscal identification number that Richard was mentioning, that it's required to complete the property. We'll open them a bank account. We can also obviously
Right, I'm sorry, Jose Maria, we're having a few problems with your connection there. If I can just ask.
The transaction once the funds arrive in their account.
Jose Maria, we're having a few problems with your connection, so I'm just going to ask you to step back for a moment, if you don't mind. Alex, could you just pick that up from the initial deposit property taken off the market and the move to the conveyancing process?
Sure. So basically, Andy, we would then carry out searches. We apply for a land registry search in English and Spanish. I think it's amazing. Land registries here in Spain issue land searches in English and Spanish. We'd send that to our clients, ask them to read the description of the property, check that it's accurate. Then we would ask the seller or the agent or their lawyer to provide us with copies of the town hall rates, water bills, electric bills. If you're buying a property on a community of owners, with a community of owners, so basically as an apartment or a townhouse, we would ask for minutes of the last 3 meetings, so we can have a good read of those meetings to see what the community have agreed and what they're planning in the future, because that ultimately may result in a cost for the buyers. And we prepare a legal report, send it to the clients with the contract, and that contract will state that basically on exchange of contracts, 10% of the purchase price will be paid, less the deposit already. Once we've agreed that contract with the buyers and the seller's lawyer, then we exchange contracts, and then we set a date for completion.
When you refer to community there, can you just explain a little bit what you mean by that?
Okay, so for example, when I moved from Torx to Marbella, Andy, we bought a townhouse. I'm sat in the conservatory of the townhouse, and around me I've got 30 properties, and we've got a shared swimming pool, and we've got shared lawn and grass area, and we've got the garden just around the corner. I asked her to kind of stop mowing the lawn as we came on air, but basically we all contribute towards the costs of the upkeep of the common areas, swimming pool, lighting, etc. So basically, as part of, when you become a property owner, and in Spain, in Spain it's all freehold, so we wouldn't buy leasehold. Leasehold is more for bars and restaurants. So you're going to buy a freehold property, but then you become a percentage owner in the community of owners.
Right. Okay. And then you're getting along to the completion process. Just talk us briefly through that. That was going to be, I think Jose Maria was going to pick that up, but unfortunately we've lost the connection there. So if you wouldn't mind picking that up, please, Alex.
Yeah, sure. So in effect, after we exchange contracts, we then set a date for completion. And completion, either the clients come to completion or completions happen before a notary in Spain. If the clients can come, great. If not, using that power of attorney, we'll go along to completion. At that point, we will arrange for the balance of the purchase price to be paid, less any debts. So if there's community fees, that will be knocked off the balance to be paid. if there are any debts with the town hall, that would be knocked off as well. There's a local capital gains tax called plusvalia. We would knock that off as well. So, and if there's a mortgage, so we would agree with the seller who the checks are made out to. So, for example, if there's a mortgage, then one check would go to the bank to redeem that mortgage, and then the rest would go to the seller, and of course the estate agent. And basically, we go along to completion with these checks. We sign the escritura, the purchase deed, and hand over the checks, and the sellers hand over the keys. And that's completion. Andy, we would then collect the deed, pay the notary fees, pay the transfer taxes, and we register the property in the client's name. And the registration can take about 2 to 3 months. But from that date of completion, that is when the clients collect the keys, and that is when the property belongs to them.
And we're having a few questions in around costs, both of sort of your services, but more generally a percentage of costs. I'm looking to buy a property worth, I don't know, 150,000 euros. What do I need to budget or think about as an amount to allocate towards taxes, legal fees, etc.?
Okay, so legal fees, Andy, of course, are always reasonable. Typically, we charge 1% with a minimum of 1,500 euros. So in your case, our legal cost would be 1,500 euros plus IVA, which is VAT. So that comes in at 1,815 euros. And included in that price, we are going to send you the power of attorney. So you're going to sign that either before notary in the UK or Spain. You'll pay your notary fees. We receive that back. We apply for your NIEs. We use an agent to apply for the NIE. So each NIE is 85 euros. And then basically, depending on the region you buy in, whether it's the Costa Blanca or elsewhere, the transfer taxes, the purchase taxes vary. So for example, Valencian region, which includes the Costa Blanca, is 10%. Down where I'm based in the Costa del Sol, it's 8%. Pop over to the Canaries, second-hand property starts at 6.5%. Whereas brand new property, you pay VAT at 10%. So the costs of purchase depend on where you buy. But I would say allow between 10 and 15%.
Right. Okay. And a quick question that came in then, which touched on your previous answer. Does somebody need to be in Spain to complete, or can that be done under power of attorney?
Exactly. I'd say the majority of our clients we complete for using a power of attorney. So they don't tend to come over for completion. Completion is before a notary between 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock. So they typically arrive, say, on a Friday and collect the keys then from the agent, or we can courier the keys to them in the UK. Okay, thanks, Alex, for the moment. Richard, in your experience, typically what sort of problems arise during this process? This is prompted in part by a question from Lynn Lambert, who said there's lots of resale property available. I'm under the impression sometimes property can come with accumulated debts. How do I make sure these are not passed on to me as a new buyer?
Well, I think we've answered that part by saying you use a lawyer at the outset, because that will be flagged up in their due diligence. Any liens or charges or that sort of thing on property, they will all be picked up by your lawyer, and then you'll have a discussion about him or her being able to remove them, and if there's a lingering consequence, whether you proceed or not. Other problems that could crop up, Alex will probably have other examples, but things like swimming pools that have been built without the right planning permission, particularly in rural areas, even buildings that might not have the right planning permission. That's less now, because all new builds the due diligence process with new developments is pretty rigid in Spain now. It's one of the safest times to buy there. And the other thing is, talking of new builds, being sold a property that hasn't been given its certificate of habitation shouldn't be sold without that, so check that. What else? There can be delays or disputes between the vendor and the buyer. This might be over furniture, how they're leaving the property, or if, I mean, it has been known, I've seen it, where the currency can swing quickly and the vendor then wants to change the price, and that sort of thing, but they should be protected against that, the buyer should. So there's a number of things, but really anything to do with planning and regulation and property law, your lawyer should pick up on at quite an early stage. So yeah, Alex, I don't know.
Yeah, I think you've covered it, Richard. One of the other things we do, for example, if there is a mortgage, the seller's got a mortgage on the property, not only do we pay the bank and ensure that the bank come and cancel the debt on the day, we also hold back monies to cancel the debt, the notary fees for signing the deed to cancel that debt, and also at the land registry. So we always hold back a few additional costs there. But by and large, the conveyancing process is safe and quite secure. The notaries are widely used in Spain, which is very different to the UK. So they're there to protect the interests of both parties and make sure that if you're buying something, you will get what you're buying. And that will be explained to you if you come along to completion, because a notary won't sign a deed unless you have a translator there and you're fully informed of what you're signing.
Can I add as well? Sorry, Andy, just because we're talking about an overseas market, there's a lot of people selling and moving back to their home country. It might not be the UK, because obviously there are a lot of French, German, Scandinavians who buy in Spain and they move backwards and forwards. So that can also sometimes delay the process, where people, or you might be waiting to sell someone might be waiting to sell a house. The vendor might be waiting for a chain to complete back in the home country. So when you are inquiring about a property to buy, get the whole picture about the vendor and what potential hold-ups there could be. They're not legal ones particularly, but they're just to do with the logistical side of people moving around. It's a transient market, overseas property, so you need to think about that as well.
That's a very good point.
We're having a number of questions coming in on a subject here which you may have heard of, called Brexit, and somebody asks, do you think there will be a limit introduced on the number of days that you could stay in your second home after Brexit? Which I think is unlikely. We'll come back to that, but let's do a quick poll of our audience. I'm going to ask you the question: how many of you see Brexit, which in the light of the current pandemic does seem a little bit behind us now, but is still in the background? How many of you see Brexit as a barrier to buying in Spain? If you think it's a barrier, yes. If not, then no. And let's just see how many people are impacted by what has been dragging on now for, where are we, nearly 4 years? I think we've been discussing this word. Well, yeah. Who would have guessed that? We've actually got the Brexit split. I think we voted to leave 52-48, and coincidentally, that is the results of our survey today. 52% are not held back. Well done. Get on with it. 48% do see it as a barrier. Richard, what's your view of the impending Brexit at the end of this year?
I don't see it as a reason not to buy or move to Spain. If you really want to, it will be possible still after the transition period. It could involve a bit more paperwork, a little bit more expense in terms of applications, and but it's not going to grind to a halt, the application or the welcoming of British people to Spain at all. It's just going to be a different process. If you can move before the end of the year and get your residencia, then that's the best thing, because that's the smoothest process still. At the moment, we're still classed or treated as EU citizens, so we have the automatic entitlement to residency. After the end of the year, you'll be able to move to Spain, but we don't know yet. There's still uncertainty. Alex might have more information, but yeah, worst case is we're treated as third country nationals, so Australians, Asians, and you have to apply for a visa. The key thing is you want to get your residency for 5 years, and then once you've done that, you can apply for a permanent residency, and then you're a lot more settled there, and you've got you can stay there. So the thing is, if you do have to apply for a visa, you'll use a lawyer for that, and they will match one to your personal circumstances, and then you'll start accumulating your years of residency to head towards permanent residency. But that's the worst case. That it might be that the governments agree that because of the history of British people moving and buying in Spain, and there's whole communities of British people in Spain, as we know, it's not something that can just suddenly disappear, that relationship. So there might be a new type of visa. I don't know.
I think that's a good point you make, though. There's a whole bunch of non-EU nationals who currently have holiday homes in Spain. So Americans fly over to their places in Mallorca or wherever it might be, and as non-EU nationals will still be able to own property there. Alex, we've had a question in from Dawn Goodacre specifically about healthcare provision. So what about somebody who's not buying a holiday home but potentially moving there permanently, and the impact that leaving the European Union may have on their access to healthcare?
So first of all, Andy, as a result of the Brexit referendum, we've been asked and instructed by lots of clients to help them with residencias. So it's a key point to bear in mind. If you're going to live in Spain for more than 6 months a year, if you live in Spain for more than 3 months a year, then you have to apply for a residencia. But if it's more than 6 months, then you become a Spanish tax resident and you pay tax in Spain on worldwide assets and income. Okay, so basically, someone buying a holiday home is paying 3 to 4 months in Spain, that they're not a tax resident, but someone for more than 6 months has to become a Spanish tax resident. And both of those types of potential residents will need some form of healthcare. And I'm actually quite surprised talking to clients. They always kind of, whenever I speak to clients about the healthcare, they seem to think that it's going to cost them a lot more than it actually is. And the good news is that if you're retired and you're over the age of 65, you can apply for Form S1 from Newcastle, and basically you phone Newcastle Social Security and say, I'm moving to Spain. Can you send me Form S1? And they will send that through to you. And that with that form this year, you'll be able to plug in to and access Spanish healthcare. If you've got a spouse who hasn't yet retired, then you can apply for a beneficiary certificate, and they'll also be entitled to Spanish healthcare. So that's the over 65. The under 65s, basically before Brexit, needed healthcare, and private healthcare, and we set up a new website called GetSpanishResidency.com, and if you have a look on there, we've got insurance brokers who can provide quotes for medical insurance, and they compare and obtain quotes from about 2 or 3 different companies. And typically, Andy, assuming no major health conditions, you're talking about from €1,000 a year per person.
Thank you. We're actually getting quite a few questions in about residency, so it's good that you touched on that. We've now got over 400 people on this chat, so that's good. Can you apply, Alex, can you apply for residency before you complete a property purchase? No,
you can't, because basically you need an address to, whether it's a rental contract for 12 months or the property that you actually purchase. But what you can do is you can start to open a bank account now, apply for your NIE number, which is your Spanish tax number, and prepare the documents for residency. So again, have a look on our website, some great FAQs there. What we are doing, Andy, is we're helping people prepare their paperwork ready for when they'll be able to apply for residency or when they purchase their property. So we're hoping that may be September, October. But typically the Spanish authorities are asking for 3 months of bank statements, the healthcare provisions sorted, whether it's the Form S1 or private medical cover, and then in addition they want to see monies in a bank account, and 3 months of statements. So if you start that in November, you're not going to get your residency. So I would say, if you are serious about becoming a residency, open a bank account, start putting some money in there, and start preparing the paperwork for your residency process. There's a lot you can do before you actually purchase the property.
Okay. Jose Maria, welcome back. We had some technical issues, but it's good to have you back. You can jump on this question. We've heard from Colin Smith, who is in the, fortunate or unfortunate position. He agreed a purchase of a property in Spain. He signed a contract at the solicitors for an agreed completion date. Then lockdown has happened. I've granted power of attorney to my solicitor to complete the purchase, which I'm not too concerned about, but my issue is with residencia. How long do you think this will take? Do I need to travel to Spain to do it? And what about the cutoff date for Brexit? We covered the Brexit bit whilst you weren't here, but what about the timeline on applying for residencia, Jose Maria?
Well, unfortunately, I cannot obviously give you more news that it's what it officially says in the Spanish website of the Ministerio. All the police stations nowadays in Spain are closed. We can't really apply for any NI numbers or Spanish residencias. So obviously he'll need to travel to Spain, because residencia is an application that you need to apply personally. So it is important that obviously, you know, he arranged whenever this obviously is over to fix an appointment with his solicitor, and maybe his solicitor can take him to the police station nearby and apply for his residencia. There is obviously some requirements that he needs to present with that application form, like well, the padrón, that is basically the registration in the town hall where he lives in, also passport, also his NI number, also nowadays they're asking for a bank statement to obviously confirm that he obviously have enough funds or requirements to obviously live in Spain, and a few other important requirements that, depending on the region, they'll obviously need to fulfill with his solicitor. But as I said, at this time, I can't really give an answer when the residencia can be applied for.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Richard, we've had well, a series of questions in from somebody called Steve Lee. Let me just touch on a couple here. He's saying the non-residential tax return, can we pay this ourselves? My solicitor wants to charge me £100. You're an overseas property owner in Spain. What's your view of that charge and what's involved?
I am, and I do pay that tax every year as well. If you don't, by the way, that's just, I've experienced this with someone I know who didn't pay it for a number of years, and he wasn't touched. No one flagged it up until he went to sell the property, and it couldn't be transferred out of his name until that had been paid off. So it does catch up with it. It's not a huge amount of money. The actual tax for me, I think I'm in the northern part of the Costa Brava. It's around 150 euros a year, but I would imagine you can file the return. You actually have to file a return as a non-resident to the tax office. I use a local property management company, a lady I've known for a long time. She does it for me, and I think she charges about 60 or 70 euros, and that means she takes it, you know, she does it all for me, so I don't have to worry about making the claim, and the money literally comes out of my account for her fees and for the return, and it's done. I can't comment on what lawyers charge for that service, but maybe someone else can.
Well, I'm sure it's reasonable. Let's move on then to, so just to clarify on that, that's a non-residential tax that you need to pay, and if you're a property owner there, you do need to complete a tax return of some sort.
Yeah, and you pay that even if you don't. If you rent out your property, of course you have to declare that as well, and that's that. Even if you don't rent out your property, it's called a non-residential nominal tax, or
national non-residence income tax.
Income, yeah. So even if you don't rent out your property, you pay it. It's based on the cadastral value of your property. When they calculate it, I give them one of my council tax bills. They use that to calculate it. So like I said, it's not a huge amount of money, but you do want to keep on top of it just to save problems further down the line. Okay,
and the same questioner asked about drawing up a Spanish will, as did a Nick Byers. Sorry, no, a John Lurie. He said, I'm thinking about buying a property in Spain. Could I put my son's name on the deeds, and then if I pass away, well, I think that's a when, but anyway, will it automatically go to my son, Alex?
It's a really good question to raise, Andy, because basically people coming to Spain, I think have got to decide, are they moving to Spain lock, stock and barrel, in which case I'd probably recommend that they buy the property in their names. If they're not, and it's going to be a holiday home, and they want it to flow through the generations, then buying the property in their children's name is a good option. But I think it's very important to have the family conference first to discuss the purchase. If one of the children don't own a property in Spain, that could cause them tax issues in the UK, so beware of that. But in effect, what would happen is that all of the family would grant us a power of attorney. The children would own the legal title to the property, and the parents would have a life interest. And when the parents pass on, then basically there's virtually no inheritance tax to pay. Much depends on the value of the property and the location of the value of the property and the location of the property, because inheritance tax rates vary across the country. So, but virtually no inheritance tax. It's very, very efficient on Spanish inheritance tax, and also efficient from the UK tax point of view, because in effect in the UK, it's considered as a potentially exempt transfer. So if the parents live for more than 7 years, then they've reduced their UK inheritance tax liability by that amount. But just beware, Andy, death of the children, heaven forbid, before the parents pass away. So consider putting a Spanish will in place for them. If they went into debt, then that they could cause problems for the ownership, and also divorce. So if your children may have to have a little uncomfortable conversation with their potential spouses or wives or husbands about basically who that property belongs to. That property is family property, and maybe go along the road and sign a prenuptial agreement. But in effect, yeah, it's a good option, and something to consider, while you're planning your purchase. During this lockdown period, great to have those Zoom calls and discuss these options.
Jose Maria, if I was coming into your offices and you were helping me buy a property in Spain, and I was moving to Spain, but I retained a property in the UK, would you advise me to would I need to make a Spanish will as well as my UK will? What would be your recommendation?
Absolutely. I think obviously once you purchase a property in Spain, it's very important to obviously draft a Spanish will. This Spanish will only cover the Spanish assets, like the property, your funds in your accounts, any vehicles, anything that you own in Spain will be obviously granted by this Spanish will. And it's a very easy procedure. You can obviously do it through your local lawyer. You need to obviously fill in the persons or family members that you want to obviously name this will. That needs to go and be signed in front of what we call a public notary, okay, who obviously gives faith of that will, and that will then will go to what we call the central will department in Madrid, that will obviously have or hold all the wills made in this country. So it is also easier than the English system to obviously check who did the will, where it was signed, and obviously who is granted in that will. So I absolutely advise people to do a Spanish will if they're thinking or have bought a property in Spain. Yes.
Okay, put you on the spot here. A question that's just come in. How much will you charge me to do my Spanish will, roughly?
Well, I need to speak first to Alex, so we obviously get the same price, but we are charging 250 euros for a Spanish will, and that obviously also includes the notary fee, because there is as I said, there's a public notary involved, and that will include somebody who translates to you your Spanish will, and obviously the notary fee in that.
Okay, thank you. I should have said that question about the inheritance to his sons was from John Lurie, so thank you for that. We're getting a lot of questions in about mortgages, so we are just going to do a quick poll. Can I ask you all out there, how many of you, are you considering a mortgage, or do you require a mortgage to facilitate your purchase in Spain? Yes or no? Are you loaded up with cash, or do you need a mortgage to buy your Spanish property home? Obviously, one would love to be in a cash position, but it's not always the easiest. And there's 68% of you out there have just got cash, or maybe equity release from a UK property or selling up. But a third of the audience are looking for a mortgage. And Nick Byers also asks, before the lockdown, I had a mortgage application approved. How long do you think this will last for? He also asks, is it easy for first-time buyers to buy a property in Spain with a mortgage? Richard, are you okay to kick off on that one?
Yeah, make it. I'll go back first of all to when you said people with cash, obviously buying with cash because they can. Even if you have the cash to buy at the moment in Spain, it's not. It can make sense depending on your personal circumstances to buy with a mortgage because the rates are so low there. The European Central Bank Euribor rate, which most European banks peg their mortgages to, is in negative territory still. And even as a non-resident buyer, you're getting very competitive deals on fixed rates, variable rates, good terms. And if you look at the exchange rate at the moment, it's historically low. Sterling's weak. We hope, certainly as someone who visits Spain regularly, that the rate does creep up again and sterling strengthens. But one way you can hedge against the current low rate is by taking a cheap mortgage in Spain, and then further down the line, if you want to redeem that mortgage when sterling strengthened, you can then transfer your funds over and do that. Maybe for slightly
in that instance, you're not exposed to any fluctuation. Your costs are in euros, and it just stays the same.
So your only exposure at the point of purchase is the deposit, the small deposit, and then the rest you can service the mortgage until the rate increases in your mortgage. It's cheaper to pay that off. And a lot of the mortgages, they have minimal or no redemption penalties as well. So it's worth thinking about. In terms of how long does a mortgage offer last? Well, first of all, if you do go out to Spain and you're thinking of buying a mortgage, you can get a mortgage in principle quite quickly from a broker. Ideally, a broker will have relationships with a number of different banks across Spain, and they often get very good deals that only they might get. So speak to brokers, and you can do that before you even go out and look at property. So you're ready, you're in a good position to put a deposit down and proceed with a purchase when you find a property. Normally they last 3 months, a mortgage in principle from a bank. Whether they're making exceptions at the moment because everything's obviously ground to a halt, and banks might be, so long as your circumstances haven't changed as well, of course, during this strange time, then there's no reason the bank, they won't just reauthorize the mortgage in principle at the end of it. But that will come down to that's when a good broker will fight your corner and hopefully try and get your offer prolonged. The other thing about going out,
what sort of loan to value might I expect to raise against a Spanish property? What do you think I would have to put down in cash, and what might I be able to take out in percentage terms?
Normally it's up to about 70, sometimes 75% loan to value you're getting. I think that's probably what you're seeing, is it, Alex and Jose?
I'd say up to 70%. So on top of that, and the bank, I'd always recommend using an independent mortgage broker because they've got deals with different banks, and the banks have deals at different times of the year. So I'd say, contact an independent mortgage broker, and then yes, so on top of the 70% loan to value, so you need that 30% plus about 15% on top of costs. So you need a good healthy deposit of about 45%.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We said we finish up in 3 quarters now, but we have questions coming in, and let's face it, we've got nothing else better to do. So let's see if we can help these people out while the lawyers are not charging for their valuable time. We've assumed so far resale purchases, somebody buying a property that's built and being habited. Got a question here saying, I'm interested in buying a new property, in fact, an off-plan property. It's not built yet. What are the issues surrounding this, and what do I need to be aware of? Please, Alex.
So there's a lot of off-plan property out for sale at the moment. I'd always recommend you buy from a reputable builder. As a result of the previous recession that we had, 2008, each developer has to hand over a bank guarantee. So every time you make a payment, the bank guarantee will be provided. So if the developer went bust, then your monies would be protected. Okay, so when you're contacting the agent, lawyer, speaking to a developer, make sure that they will provide a bank guarantee. We're acting for someone at the moment. The builder hasn't got that bank guarantee in place, but what we've come up with instead is that the monies are going to be deposited with the notary. So if the bill doesn't get completed by a certain date, those monies will be returned. So it's just important that those monies are being paid whilst the property is being built are protected. And then on top of that, and you don't pay for new properties, you pay VAT, so EVA, and EVA across Spain is 10%, and slightly lower in the Canaries. And then on top of that, you'll pay stamp duty of up to 1.5%. So by and large, Andy, for a brand new property, just in taxes, you're looking at 11.5%. So I'd say if they allowed 15, 16% on top of the purchase price for their costs, they'd be covered.
Okay. Anything you want to add to that, Jose Maria, about new build or plan, in fact?
Yes, well, I would like to add that obviously it's very important that once you've and you're viewing a few new build properties, that when you've decided to obviously go ahead with one, to come and see your lawyer. Why? Because obviously, you know, your lawyer will need to do a few checks and searches on planning permission, on obviously if the property is in the builder's name, if obviously the company who's building it is solvent. So all the kind of things that obviously will give you peace of mind to go ahead and sign a reservation contract or a private purchase contract. And as I said, as Alex said to all of you, nowadays it's very safe to buy a property in Spain because there's bank guarantees to cover obviously any payments in the case that the developer went bust in the worst scenario. So as I said, it's the same procedure like in the UK, but you need to obviously work with your solicitor to confirm all this information and to obviously have a peace of mind with the purchase.
Okay, thank you. We've had a question through saying, how do I find a suitable lawyer? I'm going to do a quick plug here on aplaceinthesun.com. Apart from being able to search for properties and download buying guides, we do have a list of advertising lawyers who've paid to advertise their services with us. I'm guess more locally, Alex, as British Chamber of Commerce list, something like that.
Yeah, a good point to check is the British Embassy. So they publish a list of lawyers who act for clients in the region. So basically, you can go onto the British Embassy in Spain's website, and of course, you know, Jose and our firms, we act for clients buying property and selling property across Spain as well.
Yeah, and of course coming along to one of our exhibitions when we're back up and running, hopefully at the NEC in Birmingham in September. Alex, if you could help with this question, I've got a gentleman emailed in who said, I am a joint UK and Irish passport holder, but my wife is UK passport holder. We intend to retire to Spain, but it may not happen this year. If we don't get in before the 31st of December, will my wife need a visa to join me, or will she automatically be granted residency as spouse of an EU member? Do we know an answer to that yet?
Yeah, that's it's a good point. We are active with clients in similar positions. In effect, yes. So I'd say buy the property in joint names still. So British passport and Irish passport, and then the Irish person would apply for residency and obtain residency, and then the spouse can piggyback onto that.
Okay, thank you. Richard, one for you. I have heard that in some areas I'm not able to rent out a property if I bought one there. I want to do this to support my purchase. How do I find out if I can rent out my property, or what are the rules around rentals?
Good question. In Spain, in most regions, you need a license to rent a property out and advertise it. This is a rule that's set by the regions. It was it used to be set by the national government. I can't remember what year it was, but they then put it in the hands of the regions, the regional governments, because obviously Spain has regional governments to oversee all this. The best, so in all the main buying regions, Andalusia, Valencia, you'll find that the town halls will have certain rules about where you can do it, about licensing and how to apply. Your lawyer will be able to help you as well. But as a rule, in Spain, take it that you will need to apply for a license, and there will be various checks that will be done on the property, such as health and safety, that it meets certain standards, and then you'll be registered. You'll have a registration number for your property, like a license number, which lets you rent it out. And when you use websites like Holiday Lettings, Airbnb to rent out your property, a lot of them now require you to include that number to prove that you have the right license in place. And the Spanish authorities, how true this is, I don't know, but I believe they have been known to actually browse these listing sites and check for properties that don't advertise a license number. And then, of course, you get a knock on the door if you're the owner. Some areas of Spain have tighter rules on light renting for longer anyway. Mallorca tends to be the islands where obviously there's limited space. Hotels are fighting for business, and they've had authority and tried to control the rentals market more. Mallorca and the Canaries are typical of that. It's not many parts of Mallorca where it's easy to rent out a property. And even on a more local level, within certain communities, the community of owners, the group of owners that are part of the community, they might set their own rules about rentals as well, about whether you can do it, or if there are rules surrounding when you can do it. So that's another important thing to check when you're looking at properties. Ask your agent or the developer or whoever you can at the community what the rules are for rentals, especially if you're going to rely on it for servicing a mortgage or just running your property. You don't want to buy somewhere and find out you can't rent it out.
Okay. Thank you, Richard. Let's try to do some quick fire questions if we can. I know there's not always a very short answer, but Jose Maria, I'm going to buy a holiday home in Spain. How much would it cost me to have private health insurance in Spain?
Well, it's quite straightforward. You obviously need to speak to an insurance company, and we're talking about between 200 to 300 euros per year. So it's not very expensive. Obviously, there is the option, if they become residents, they can apply for what we call the SID card, and then they'll have free health assistance in the whole Spain. So we're not talking about more than that money, to be honest. So it's not a very expensive deal.
Okay, thank you. I thought it was slightly higher, but Alex, have you got anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, but basically, they've got two options. So private medical cover. I'd say, assuming no major health complications, you're starting at €1,000 per person per year. That's generally what we're seeing, and we've had some clients go to Bupa in the UK and obtain quotes from them. But no, I think it's best to obtain the quote from a local insurance company, and it's upwards of that. Once they've been here for a year, they've been on the Padron, so the census for a year, they can then sign up to what's known as the Convenio Especial, which is basically they pay into the Spanish state and plug into Spanish healthcare here. So you do private medical for a year, obtain your residency, and then you can go into the Convenio Especial, and that's about €60 a month.
Okay, and what about, Alex, then? Somebody asked here, I'm a pensioner. Should I get my pension paid into the UK or into Spain? What are the issues around that, Alex?
Well, as part of the residency process, buyers will have to, so buyers and property owners have to show 3 months of bank statements, and the Spanish authorities want to see pensions being paid directly into their bank account. So I would suggest they speak to a currency company, and during the process of residency, they have their pension paid into their bank account, and then once the residency is obtained, then they can change those arrangements, because some people might want to keep a UK bank account, have their pension paid into that bank account, and only transfer the money over to Spain when the rate's good.
Okay, another quick fire one, Jose Maria. Is my initial deposit payment refundable if the lawyer finds a problem with the property?
Yes, well, this is something that it should be put down in the reservation contract. Obviously, our job is to do, as I said, all the searches, the checks on the property, confirm the owner is the same person that obviously shows in the contract, if there's any important debts, embargoes, loans, mortgages. So if it says in that reservation contract or private purchase contract that it has to be refundable in the case there's any issue, yeah, it should be refundable without any doubt.
Cool. Thank you. We're jumping around a bit here, but these are the questions coming in. Richard, I'm a cash buyer. Does it make it easier?
Well, it makes it a lot quicker, and I mean, the vendor always prefers that because the money's on the table, and I think that's the case anywhere, really, and it's a lot quicker. So it does. But,
I think,
but as
Andy,
I said,
sorry, Richard. Yeah.
no, carry on.
I was going to say, if you've got a cash buyer, you can negotiate hard on the price, because you can put in a reservation contract that, you know, assuming everything's all legal, it's registered, you can say, look, we'll complete quickly. So if you've got a desperate seller who's been there for some time, you know, you can really negotiate hard on the price if you're a cash buyer. If you're going to apply for a mortgage, it's going to take a little bit longer. So I'd certainly, you know, if you are going to need a mortgage, put your arrangements in place before you make an offer. But cash is king.
Okay, Alex, while you're there, how many names can I have put on the title deeds?
I think, well, basically, as many as you want, because we've acted for, and Jose, correct me if I'm wrong here, but under Spanish law, which is different to the obviously UK law, when it comes to inheritances, Spanish people have to leave 2/3 of their assets to their children, and 1/3 they can freely dispose of. And as you can imagine, over the generations, if you've got lots of kids, that then filters through. So I seem to remember dealing with an inheritance, and we had about 13 people registered. But by and large, for a British buyer, you're probably talking about 3 to 4 people would be the optimum.
Right. Yeah. Okay. If we can cover we have touched on this, Jose Maria, but it's been asked in 2 or 3 questions now, really about tax status. Somebody's a UK property owner and a Spanish property owner, which they rent out, but they still have business interests in the UK. What's the story on a tax return?
Well, this is basically what we're talking about regarding the non-resident tax. Obviously, if these clients, or these gentlemen and lady, don't live in Spain and don't spend more than 183 days a year, then they become what we call a non-resident. So they need to present or apply for what we call the non-resident tax, and that is due 31st of each year, 31st of December of each year. So the easiest thing, as Richard and Alex mentioned, the easiest thing is obviously you cope with your local solicitor, local lawyer, because we'll need some paperwork to confirm what's this amount. We'll need the deeds, we'll need what we call the local tax or SUMA here in the Valencia region, and we'll calculate the amount of this non-resident tax. It all depends obviously on the square meters of the property, location. There's a few factors there, but we're talking about 200, 250 euros, 300 euros maximum on this non-resident tax, and then obviously you need to add the lawyer's fee. So it is a quite easy procedure, but you need to contact a professional to present this tax.
Okay, Alex, some questions coming in around the physical location of a solicitor that a British buyer might use. Somebody specifically asking, I found a solicitor based in the Spanish mainland, but I'm buying in the Canaries. Does that matter? Is it better to have a local solicitor? Is it or a UK-based solicitor? What's your putting aside your vested interest of being based in the Costa del Sol? What's your recommendation on that?
I think what is really important is that they instruct a specialist lawyer who specialises in property purchases. So my experience, so we you know, in our firm we have got lawyers based in the islands, and we rely on them to complete those purchases. So if you can instruct a lawyer locally who specialises in property purchases, I'd recommend you do that. But by and large, you know, more and more often we are acting for clients across the whole of Spain, and we don't actually go to the notary in that local area. We're completing it remotely, similar to the UK. So I'd say, carry out your research on your lawyer, make sure they specialize in property purchases, make sure they speak your language, make sure they confirm costs in writing to you. That's really quite an important point. And then choose your lawyer, and if they live in the area, even better.
I would suggest, as Alex said, I think it's much easier that you have a local lawyer, because there's some issues that you might find, obviously, that your English solicitor or obviously other solicitors that don't work in the area cannot find out. We'll need to go, for example, to a town hall to verify some information, or to see if the planning permission is obviously already in place. So there's a few things that, from my point of view, I think it's easier that you get a local lawyer than obviously someone abroad, to be honest.
Thank you.
So Andy, what we do find is we do find lawyers from the UK or from other regions doing property work, and I definitely recommend that you use someone who lives in Spain and specialises in the area.
Yeah.
Okay. Alex, a couple of questions here that overlap. Somebody says, I'm not looking to buy until middle of next year. Can I get an NIE number now? From somebody else saying, I'm not buying till next year. Can I get residencia now? I think they're easy yes, no answers.
Yeah, so you can obtain, basically we do that for clients way before they actually purchase property or rent a property out, and we can open a bank account for them now and apply for their NIE number. So that can be done now. As far as the residencia process is concerned, we touched on it before, but basically you need the NIE to start off with, and you'll need a bank account. So I'd start that process, but you can't do it. You can't apply for the residency until you actually have an address or property in Spain.
Okay, so see if you can answer this one quite quickly. It's quite a specialist question, but there have been 3 in now from British nationals not living in the UK currently, looking to buy in Spain. One looking to buy through a company, but the common theme across the 3 questions is, does it affect the purchase process, the fact that I'm not currently a UK tax resident, even though I'm a British citizen? Alex.
Okay, that I'd say if you're considering buying in a property, we need, it can be done, and the process is exactly the same. We would need an NIE number for the directors of the company, and also we would prepare the power of attorney on behalf of the director to be signed in their country. So if they're UK based, we would send the power of attorney to them to be signed in the UK, and we would prepare board minutes saying, Alex Radford Limited is going to buy a Spanish property in Spain. Alex Radford, on behalf of Alex Radford Limited, signs a power of attorney in favour of a Spanish lawyer to do that, and that's the process. And we apply for the NIE for the company, for the director, and then the process is the same, Andy. But before you buy it in the name of a company, just got to be aware of, for example, the legal ownership is in that of a company. So basically, if Alex Radford, the person, wants to rent that property, he's got to pay the market rent for that property. So you can play around with usage a little bit, because it's normal that you'd have to go out there and manage the property. But if you spent 12 months living in there, then you'd be expected to pay rent to the company. So you're not actually owning it; the company is.
Right. Well, we went a little bit over, but it's good to be able to answer people's questions. We've had a really good turnout today, so thank you everybody for giving us your time and coming along to this session. I hope we've managed to cover most of your questions. There's an email address if you have further queries on our webpage, so aplacingthesun.com/webinars. That's where we have the next sessions all lined up. We're doing 4 a week for the next 4 weeks. As I said earlier, this is replicating the seminars we would have run at our exhibition that's not taking place. So they are a wide-ranging bunch of seminars covering the buying process in different countries. Quite a lot of content in Spain if you want to sign up to our future Spanish ones. So thank you for coming along. Thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you to Alex, to Jose Maria, and to Richard. Thank you, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Buenas tardes.